We have the pleasure of welcoming Karin Hurt today to our interview series. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick intro of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work with AI and automation technologies. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Karin Hurt is the founder of Let's Grow Leaders, and she helps leaders around the world achieve breakthrough results without losing their soul. A former Verizon wireless executive, she has over 2 decades of experience in sales, customer service, and HR. She was recently named on Inc's list of 100 great leadership speakers in American Management Association's 50 Leaders to Watch. She's the author of Winning Well, a manager's guide to getting results without losing your soul, Courageous Cultures, and Overcoming an Imperfect Boss, and Glowstone Geek. Very, very welcome to you, Karin Hurt. We're very thrilled to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure. I wanted to begin, by asking you, what is Let's Grow Leaders? What was your vision when you started writing, when you started, imagining what kind of an organization it would be? And what's your vision now?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Yeah. So when I started Let's Grow Leaders, I was still an executive at Verizon. So it was just a blog at the beginning. And I was finding that I was telling the same leadership stories again and again as I was going in to try to help mentor and transform my teams. And I was also finding that it was really necessary as my team was getting bigger and bigger. Ultimately I had a 10,000 person team. It was impossible for me to develop every leader on the team, right? So I thought, how do I break these things down into very practical tools and techniques that we can scale? And so I started writing about that on the blog. I never had any intention of leaving Verizon. But what I noticed is that I started getting all these phone calls and people were asking me, hey, can you come be our keynote speaker? When are you going to write a book? Can you come do consulting? I'm like, wait a minute, no, I have this day job. So one day I did go do a keynote. I took a day off from work and just did it for free. And I got off the stage and the other keynote speaker who was following me happened to be the head of the National Speakers Association. And he said, when are you leaving Verizon? And I said, did I say that from the stage? And he's like, no, but I can tell you are meant to do this. And I thought, So I thought about it and I gave Verizon 4 months notice so everything would be a smooth transition. And I started Let's Grow Leaders as the company. And it has been quite a journey. It's been 6 years. We work internationally. We do leadership development programs all over the world, both in person and live online. And we do keynote speaking and of course, the writing. We are about to launch our next book, which is called Courageous Cultures, How to Build Teams of Micro-Innovators, Problem Solvers, and Customer Advocates. And we're delighted about that. We partnered with the University of North Colorado, so it's really heavily research-based, and we have good case studies from leaders across a variety of industries. So that's a little bit about who we are. I'm in business with my husband, David Dye, and so we do a lot of the programs together jointly, as well as do some of them independently, and always collaborate on our writing. So
fulfilling to you. That really is amazing. And over the years, we've seen different kinds of leadership styles. So how do you think these leadership styles have morphed with changing times and priorities? And especially now, what should be the focus of leaders as we delve into an uncertain future?
It's interesting. Clearly over time, there has been more of a migration away from this top down and to create more of a collaborative, the servant leadership, the engaging. And yet you still see some organizations not acting that way. You still, and in some governments not acting that way, right? And so it's interesting. It's not been a total evolution. And I think it's the leaders that are really what we call winning well, getting results with and out losing your soul by being a decent human being, are the people who can show up with confidence and humility and focus on results and relationships and really manage that balancing act. I think when we think about now, in this crazy, uncertain times, there are a couple of things that are really vital. And the number one is absolutely empathy. We are leading in a circumstance where the whole world is dealing with real uncertainty, both professionally and personally. And you've got to know that every person on your team is dealing with a nuance that you may not even know about, and is under tremendous stress. So I think first is, are you having the human connection? And how are you doing that even when you are remote? And so I do think turning on the cameras, being deliberate about having the small talk, being deliberate about really asking personal questions to see check in with how people are feeling it's always important, but it's more important now than ever before. And the next is really clarity. Clarity of expectations is always so critical, but it's even more important now because people are so distracted. There's so much going on. So we always talk about, setting clear expectations and then reinforcing those expectations 5 times, 5 different ways. And I think that's really very, very important. And the next is, how do you really identify what are your most important strategic priorities? Because with so much going on, you're not going to be able to accomplish everything. So how do you know what you must be doing for your business, for your team right now to make sure that you're continuing to move the ball forward? So I would say those are the big 3 that I would focus on right now.
Absolutely, that makes so much sense. And empathy is really the need of the hour, because now there are so many remote people and you just have to collaborate with them. And it's really not an easy task, right? And, talking about that, how do you think leaders should balance the need for employee welfare and safety with, business objective approaches and the need for being in the office?
So, there are certainly some industries, right? My sister is running operations right now at a hospital, and, she's got to be there face to face, right? There are certain industries where people really are absolutely mission critical. And, the other people in the economy that are keeping things running, the grocery stores, the food distributors, right? We have those are folks that we need to do whatever we can to protect them and to make sure that they've got the equipment they need for protection, that the policies are in place to protect them. And in those kinds of circumstances, people do need to come to work. What is important for everyone else is, what are the creative ways that you can do to keep your business rolling without having, without putting people in danger? Because the bottom line is, and I'm not a health expert, but we definitely know that if this gets worse, it's going to impact if the spread continues so fast, it's going to impact the economy either way, right? As healthcare systems become overwhelmed. So I am in the belief that at the moment we need to do everything we can to protect as many people as possible so that we can all get through this and begin to reestablish a new normal. And but what has really been interesting is, for the last couple of years, we've been running a international live online program in 8 different countries. And so we've been doing this for a while, and it works really well if you use the right technology. And so we've been able to transition a lot of our clients to do the programs remotely. And you have to do some things differently. You're not going to have people join you for an 8-hour program live online. So for example, we're working with one of our clients now, and we just took his one full day program, and we're breaking it up into 90-minute sessions over a longer period of time. And there's some advantages to that, right? Because now and they do work in between sessions and be applying what they've learned. So there can be done well. There can be some benefits to transitioning to, a live remote situation.
Absolutely, and you're helping so many people out there, especially people that cannot really travel, cannot commute long distances, or they might have disabilities. This is such an important need, and we must be flexible to make it more inclusive. And that's kind of my next question: how important a role will technology and digital play in the inclusive workplace of the future as we imagine it to be?
It was interesting. I was just talking with this chief learning officer who is a client of mine, and I was just thinking about a program that we had done. And she said, the thing is, I'm so glad we made everybody do it remotely, as opposed to having the people that were co-located able to be face-to-face and then everybody else dialing in. Because what that creates is sort of an in-group and an out-group. And so I do think that this is going to level the playing field for a lot of people. And if people are trained to do this well, then you can be paying attention to who has contributed. One of the things that we do is we make a list of all the participants in a program, and we put a check mark next to when someone has spoken up. And then we, because that way, if the introverts are reluctant or they're getting overwhelmed by the extroverts, we can then deliberately pull people in. And we'll do that in a way where it's not like putting them on the spot. So I would say, okay, so this is, great. Okay, you know what, Laura, I haven't heard you from your opinion on this. I'm going to come to you next. But first, John, let me take you. And so you give Laura a heads up, and then you give her time to think. And so I think techniques like that really do create more inclusion. And to your point about people with disabilities, and we need to be thinking about all of that because, some of the technology, so if you have someone, who, for example, who has a vision problem, well, that's going to be difficult as you move and people are chatting and doing things like that. So we have to be able to think through who are all the people on the team, what are their circumstances that they're faced with. I think another inclusion issue that we're having right now as people are working from home without their kids being able to not be there, right, is we have this diversity of parents versus non-parents. And, how do you manage that? And when do you schedule your meetings? And so that the parents can also multitask and juggle through what they're having to do to support kids at home who need to eat and need help with their schoolwork and that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and that's a very important point, that diversity, not only as we know the term to be, but now there's a new definition to it because we're all remote working and there are people who are parenting and those who are not. So that's a very critical point that you put out there. And how important do you think that now with the rising millennial workforce and there's the gig economy, a lot of us belong to the gig economy. Do you think that the corporate world is already prepared for this scenario, or do they still have to work on that?
I think one of the most important things that people are not necessarily fully evolved in some companies around the gig economy is how do you create culture in a gig world? And I think in the past, when you had mostly employees and a handful of contractors, people didn't worry about, are they being included? They're just the contractors. But now you see organizations that have a lot of contractors coming in and out. And I think there's a real benefit from that if you can tap into it, because you have now people who have best practices from other companies that they've worked in. And so not just to say, hey, get on board and do things our way, but to show up incredibly curious and say, how did they do that in these other places that you worked with? And you can bring in all these ideas could be, if you do that well and you don't just treat them as second class, people in your organization, I think is really important. So I think we need to get better at that. How do you pull in the best practices? And how do you make sure that you are still treating people with respect? Just fire the contractors when the economy gets wrong. No, because you want those people to come back. So how do you become an organization that gig workers want to come work with, and they are telling their friends. And how do you build culture around that? I think is a really important question. And I know that there are companies that are really doing this well. And it's back to making sure you're still connecting at a human level and still getting to know your contractors as human beings and engaging them as if they are an important part of the team, because they are.
And that really makes a lot of sense. And talking about culture, uh, what is the role of a leader when it comes to maintaining the culture of an organization, and what does it really take to change from the inside as a leader?
Well, you really, this is all our next book is all about this, but I really believe it is first off, what is the culture that you want? And not just what you think you should have, but that you really deep down, what are your core values? Because culture is all about values. And our favorite definition of culture is Seth Godin, who says, people like us do things like this. And that's not just what you say you want people like us to do, but how do people act on it on a daily basis? I just got off the phone with a CEO that we're doing a lot of culture. We've been doing a lot of cultural transformation work with, and they have a fantastic culture, and they had chosen their values and they've been living their values, but she's got a direct report who's not behaving according to those values. And so the conversation we just had was, that you have to have zero tolerance for this, because the minute you let that happen, right, that's when your culture begins to break down, because people look up and say, well, if she's doing this, well, then they must not be serious. So I think that part of the culture, building it from inside out, is determining what it is that you want people like us to do, and then make sure that everything is aligned around that. Your communication, what you're rewarding, how you're managing performance, all of that is consistently, every single message is being sent to reinforce that culture. And, I think part of the, to build a really great culture and what we call courageous culture is this balance of clarity of vision and then showing up really curious, so that you are tapping into all the best ideas and thinking and problem solving of every member of your team.
Mhm. Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about giving feedback to an employee as a leader, what do you think is the best way to give feedback? Because I do hear a lot of positive criticism, and you've got to be more gentle than tough. What is your take on that?
I think it's, for me, we in Winning Well, we talk about showing up with confident humility. And so when you want to be confident in confident in your skills as a leader, confident in the vision that you're setting out, confident that you can get there from here with your team. And, because teams want to follow a confident leader. But then humility to surround yourself with the people who will challenge you, to know your vulnerabilities, to admit your mistakes. And that's not weak, right? That actually takes more strength to be able to admit when you're wrong. So I think it's that balance. And what you see, when you see leaders get in trouble, is when one of those is off, right? They're like so confident that they don't care about what anybody else thinks, and they shut everybody down. Or they're so humble that people don't take them seriously, and they can't get inspired. And so I think that's really, it's not as much tough versus gentle, but clear and open, I would say.
Oh yeah, that's very insightful. Being clear and being open, and just being confident as leaders. I think yes, you can really inspire people if you are very confident and you know that what your alignment is towards the culture of the organization. And so for that, you need to really strategize and know what your organizational culture will look like. And
Yes.
yeah, that would be the foundation stone. And do you think now, after we come out of the pandemic, that cultures will change? Do you think that, we'll come back with a very different mindset after this is over? And how are leaders supposed to cope with that?
I for some organizations, I hope so. Right. I hope that people are taking the time to really learn, uh, to really be paying attention to what is most important. One of the things that I think is happening for a lot of companies is they've had to realize what is the most vital things that they're working on. What of all the things they're providing for their customers do their customers care about the most? Because they can't transform everything all of a sudden very quickly. And so taking a step back and saying, how do we create the human connection that we need? And that I think there's a lot of good. If we can tap into the learnings from this, that will be very, very critical. I just wrote about this earlier this week on our blog, though. I'm also hearing some really bad behaviors that are happening, where people are saying, I got laid off via email. So where people are being so stressed and desensitized that they are doing things that are going to damage the culture for the long term. If they are not caring about their people, if they're making short-term decisions for short-term profits that are really, really on the backs of the people who've been killing themselves for the company. And I think that people should think well now about the long-term ramifications, because how you lead during this time, everybody is watching. And people will want to, as the economy recovers, they're going to want to go and work for the companies that led well during this time, that showed up with strong values, not only for the employees, but how did they act in the world?
Absolutely. I so agree with you that now is the time when you really need to show resilience and you need to show your compassion as well, because there will be a lot of fingers pointing at you and your organization, how you dealt with this situation, because these are tough times. And, when there are tough times, people definitely, point fingers at you and talk about you. So,
Yeah.
excellent point, and I totally agree with you on that one. And to wrap this conversation up, I'm going to ask you the last question. If you have any important sound bites that you'd like to leave our viewers with, that would be great.
So we always say, be the leader you want your boss to be. And, that is, I think you can learn as much from working for a bad boss as a good boss, and to really reflect on your own values as a leader and how do I want to show up in the world, and to be really deliberate about that. And if we had more people doing that, we would have less bad bosses out there. So.
Yeah, that's such an important point, and I think your book would be a testament to that. How to kind of overcome an imperfect boss, and that's kind of great advice that you've given. Thank you so much, Karin. I loved our conversation. It was a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your views with us. So thank you so much.
So glad to be here. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks.